Thanks for coming back. Straight into it. Bang. Now, if the Nimitz encounter established that something unexplained was being observed by trained military personnel, the next question is whether it was isolated. Now, one incident, no matter how credible, can still be challenged. Patterns are harder to miss. What the fuck am I doing? Why have I got these back on? One of the most widely documented mass sightings in the United States is known as the Phoenix Lights. On the evening of March 13th, 1997, thousands of people across Arizona reported seeing a series of lights moving slowly across the sky. The sightings began around 7:30 in the evening and continued for several hours, with reports coming from multiple locations, including Henderson, Nevada, through to Tucson, Arizona. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. I'm Welsh. Witnesses consistently described a large V-shaped formation of lights. Some reported seeing a solid structure blocking out the stars behind it, suggesting that the lights were attached to a single massive object rather than independent sources. Among those witnesses was Kurt Russell, legend, the actor, obviously, who was flying his private plane that night. Of course he was. Fucking hell. A BBC interview years later, he stated that he had reported seeing 6 lights in a V-shape to air traffic control during the event. At the time, he did not realise the significance of what he had just seen. More notably, the governor of Arizona at the time, Fife Symington, initially dismissed the sightings publicly. In 1997, he held a press conference where his chief of staff appeared in an alien costume, reinforcing the idea that the event was not to be taken seriously. However, in 2007, Symington reversed his position in an interview with CNN. He stated, "I saw a craft of unknown origin. It was enormous and inexplicable." He went on to say that it defied logic and that it was not something he could identify as conventional aircraft. The reversal... Now, the official explanation given by the US Air Force was that the lights were flares dropped during a military training exercise, specifically illumination flares from A-10 aircraft. That explanation accounts for some of the later sightings in the evening, particularly the stationary lights observed over Phoenix. However, it does not fully explain the earlier reports of a structured, get rid of that, moving formation described by multiple witnesses across a large geographic area. It's like they take us for idiots. Don't believe it. Didn't see anything. Shh. Again, this creates a split between what can be explained and what remains unresolved. This pattern is not limited to the United States of America. Similar investigations have taken place in the United Kingdom, where I live and where my handful of listeners live. Most of them are down the street. Between 1997 and 2009, the UK Ministry of Defence maintained a unit responsible for investigating UFO reports. During that time, thousands of sightings were recorded and analysed. In 2006, the Ministry of Defence commissioned a report known as the Condign Report. Again, I think I'm saying that right, but I think that's what it is. The purpose was to assess whether UFOs posed any threat to national security and whether further investigation was justified. The report concluded that the majority of sightings could be explained as misidentifications of known objects or natural phenomena. Yeah, we love it. However, it also included a notable statement that UAPs existing is indisputable. It went on to describe some sightings as transient atmospheric phenomena involving plasma-like formations that were proposed as a possible explanation for certain observations, particularly those involving luminous or rapidly moving objects. However, the report also acknowledged limitations. It stated that while some phenomena could be attributed to sort of natural causes, there was insufficient data to fully explain all reported behaviours. The UK Ministry of Defence ultimately closed its UFO investigation unit in 2009. Gutting. The official reasoning was that continued investigations were unlikely to provide additional defence value. That decision is often interpreted as just a dismissal by many. But in practical terms, it reflects a different conclusion that while sightings existed, they did not represent an identifiable threat that could be acted upon with current information. In other words, the phenomenon was acknowledged but not understood well enough to justify continued allocation of resources because the UK government loved to keep their money. Returning to the United States, the discussion around UAPs become more formalized in recent years with the establishment of dedicated investigative bodies. In 2022, the Pentagon established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as AARO. Its purpose to investigate unidentified objects across the air, sea, and space domains. Okay? During congressional hearings in 2023, Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO at the time, provided testimony on the current state of UAP investigations. He stated, "We have not seen anything that would lead us to believe that any of the objects we have seen are extraterrestrial origin. That is consistent with the previous official positions." However, he also stated that a number of cases remain unresolved due to insufficient data. So one hand he's saying that, one hand he's saying that. This dual position continues to define the conversation. There is no confirmed evidence of extraterrestrial technology, but there is also no complete explanation for all observed phenomena. Another relevant testimony came from former Navy pilot Ryan Graves, who spoke before Congress in 2023. Graves described frequent encounters with unidentified objects. During training missions, he stated, these encounters were not rare or isolated. They were routine. He went on to describe objects that appeared to remain stationary in high winds and then accelerate rapidly without visible propulsion. Exactly like part one. Graves also raised concerns about flight safety, noting that pilots were encountering objects that could not identify or predict, which created a potential hazard in controlled airspace. That shifts the issue from curiosity to operational Concern? Concern. 6, 7. Unidentified objects in restricted airspace represent a problem that requires explanation. From a scientific perspective, several hypotheses continue to be explored. One is that some sightings may be attributed to atmospheric plasma phenomena. Under certain conditions, ionized gases can produce luminous moving formations that may appear structured or controlled. I'm sorry, it's just, I'm fed up of their excuses. Like, it's just boring. Another possibility is advanced aerospace technology, either domestic or foreign. However, this raises questions about capabilities. The performance characteristics described in cases like the Nimitz, instant acceleration, hypersonic speeds without heat signatures and lack of visible propulsion would represent a significant leap beyond publicly known technology. But just because it's not known doesn't mean that they don't know about it. They might just not want us to know about it, which is highly likely. Sensor misinterpretation also remains a possibility. Advanced radar and infrared systems can produce complex data that requires careful analysis. In some cases, objects may appear to behave in unusual ways due to limitations in how data is produced and or displayed. However, each of these explanations addresses only part of the data. None fully account for all observed characteristics across multiple cases. What's time? Ooh. This is what the pattern becomes. This is where the pattern becomes important. Across decades, across different countries and across different systems, similar descriptions appear. Objects without visible propulsion, sudden acceleration, ability to hover, movement against prevailing wind conditions. They are recurring observations. And when observations repeat across independent cases, they move from anomaly to pattern. And they can deny it as much as they want to. I don't care. That does not confirm a specific explanation, but it does challenge the data that each case can be dismissed individually without considering the broader context. At this point, it becomes necessary to address the role of perception. Human perception is not perfect. Memory is not a fixed recording. It is influenced by context, expectation, and interpretation. However, the reliability of an observation increases when multiple independent witnesses report similar details. Yeah? Particularly when those witnesses are trained observers. In aviation, pilots are trained to identify aircraft, assess distance, speed and movement and respond to unexpected situations. Their observations are not infallible, but they are more reliable than untrained accounts. When those observations are supported by sensor data, the confidence increases further. This is why cases like Nimitz and the testimonies of pilots like Ryan Graves are taken seriously, not because they provide answers, but because they present inconsistent, credible data points. I suppose the current position, based on available evidence, remains cautious. Yeah, kosher. There is no confirmed extraterrestrial origin for UAPs. That doesn't mean it's not true. I certainly don't believe that they're not there. I believe they are there. There's no verified recovery of alien technology. Again, I gotta be honest. But there is also a body of data that cannot be fully explained. And that creates a gap between observation and explanation, a gap between data and understanding. And that gap is where the conversation now exists, because once a phenomenon is acknowledged, documented, and repeatedly observed, it cannot be dismissed in the same way it once was. It has to be addressed. And right now, it is being addressed without a definitive answer. Which means the situation has shifted. Not from unknown to known, but from ignored to unresolved. Which means the situation has shifted. Not from unknown to known, but from ignored to unresolved.